Snow drifted endlessly across the grounds of castle, turning the vast estate into a world of silver and white. From the towering windows of the manor, Duchess watched flakes dance beneath the gray winter sky. At 22, she possessed the kind of beauty poets struggled to describe, yet her loveliness was not what made people adore her. It was her kindness. Every servant in the castle knew her by name. Every struggling family on the estate had felt her generosity. For 3 years, she had been married to Duke Alaric. She loved him with every piece of her heart. The problem was that lately, she was no longer certain he knew it. Alaric stood at the head of one of the most powerful noble houses in the kingdom. At 30, he commanded respect wherever he went. Tall, handsome, and fiercely intelligent, he had spent most of his life guarding himself from disappointment. His father had been betrayed by trusted allies. His mother had endured years of humiliation from false friends who valued status more than loyalty. Those lessons had carved deep scars into him. When he first met, he had believed those scars were finally healing. She had entered his life like sunlight after a storm. Her laughter brightened silent halls. Her compassion softened his sharp edges. For the first time in years, he had imagined a future built not on duty but happiness. Yet fear was a patient enemy. It waited quietly beneath the surface. One evening, after returning from a gathering of nobles, Alaric carried a heaviness he could not shake. During the event, several lords had spoken carelessly, unaware he stood nearby. "She's young enough to be dazzled by a title. Would she have married him if he were a common merchant? Beauty often follows wealth." The remarks should have angered him. Instead, they unsettled him. That night, long after had fallen asleep beside him, he stared into the darkness. What if they were right? The thought disgusted him. Even worse, it frightened him. Over the following weeks, he became increasingly distant. He buried himself in state affairs and avoided conversations that might expose his doubts. Noticed the change immediately. She attempted to bridge the growing distance. She invited him on rides through the snowy forests they once explored together. She arranged intimate dinners beside the fireplace. She stayed awake waiting for him whenever meetings ran late. Alaric appreciated every effort, yet his uncertainty continued growing. Rather than speaking honestly, he began searching for proof. Proof that she loved him. Proof that she did not. The contradiction consumed him. Eventually, fear defeated reason. He devised a test. With the help of forged financial documents and carefully planted rumors, he created the illusion that much of his fortune had been lost through failed investments. Reports circulated suggesting the family's influence was weakening. Even some senior servants were allowed to overhear conversations designed to reinforce the deception. Alaric watched closely. If loved wealth more than him, surely she would reveal her true nature now. Days passed, then weeks. What he witnessed should have ended his doubts. Instead, it deepened the tragedy. Upon hearing whispers of financial hardship, never complained. She never questioned her future. She never suggested leaving. Instead, she quietly visited the estate jeweler. One by one, she sold pieces of her personal jewelry. A sapphire bracelet gifted by her grandmother. A diamond necklace she treasured. Several valuable heirlooms from her family. The money was discreetly transferred to support household expenses. When worried servants approached her, she reassured them. "We will endure this together," she told them gently. "His Grace has carried burdens for all of us. Now it is our turn to stand beside him." Alaric learned of every sacrifice. Yet instead of finding peace, he became obsessed with searching for flaws. Fear always demanded more evidence. One snowy afternoon, his opportunity appeared. As he crossed a corridor near the western drawing room, he heard voices behind a partially opened door. "Was speaking with her closest friend, lady. I don't know how much longer this can continue," said softly. Alaric froze. His pulse quickened. "You look exhausted," replied. "I am exhausted." The words struck him like a blade. "I barely recognize him anymore," continued. Alaric's jaw tightened. Every insecurity he carried surged to the surface. He stepped away before hearing another word. He never learned that had been speaking about his emotional distance, not his financial situation. He never heard urge patience. He never heard insist she still loved her husband despite everything. Instead, he filled the silence with his worst fears. For 3 days, anger battled heartbreak inside him. By the fourth evening, a violent snowstorm swept across the estate. Wind howled against the castle walls. Ice rattled the windows. The entire manor seemed to tremble beneath winter's fury. Alaric summoned to his study. She entered with concern written across her face. The room felt unusually cold. The fire crackled weakly. Alaric stood beside his desk, his expression unreadable. "Is something wrong?" she asked. He stared at her for several moments. This was the moment he could have chosen honesty. He could have confessed his fears. He could have asked questions. He could have trusted the woman who had spent years proving her devotion. Instead, pride spoke first. "I'm done with this marriage." The words landed with brutal force. Blinked. For a moment, she seemed unable to understand what she had heard. "What?" "I'm ending this marriage." Color drained from her face. "Alaric, what are you saying?" "You heard me." Shock gave way to pain. Her eyes shimmered with confusion. "What?" He looked away. Because he feared hearing the truth. Because admitting his insecurities felt unbearable. Because trust required courage he did not possess. "Leave by dawn," he said coldly. The silence that followed felt endless. Stared at him as if the ground beneath her had vanished. Tears gathered in her eyes. "What have I done?" "Nothing." The answer screamed inside him. Yet he remained silent. "If I've made a mistake, tell me." Still silent. "Please." Her voice broke. For a brief second, Alaric nearly surrendered. Nearly crossed the room. Nearly admitted everything. Then stubbornness tightened its grip. He nodded toward the door. "You should begin packing." The tears finally escaped. Not loud sobs. Not dramatic pleading. Just quiet heartbreak. The kind that hurt far more. Without another word, turned and walked away. Hours later, servants watched in disbelief as she packed her belongings. No one understood what had happened. Snow continued falling outside. The castle had never felt so empty. Near midnight, sat alone in her chamber. A single candle illuminated the room. She stared at a blank sheet of paper for several minutes before picking up a pen. Carefully, she began writing. Line after line filled the page. When she finished, tears stained the ink. She folded the letter and placed it on the desk where Alaric would easily find it. Before dawn, wrapped in a heavy cloak, she descended the grand staircase. No farewell celebration. No dramatic scene. Only heartbreak. The massive doors opened. Freezing wind rushed inside. Stepped into the storm. From an upstairs window, Alaric watched her disappear into the swirling snow. He told himself he had done the right thing. He told himself the test had revealed everything. Yet as her figure vanished into the white darkness, a strange ache settled deep within his chest. For the first time, victory felt exactly like loss. And waiting downstairs, untouched upon his desk, lay the letter that would change everything. Morning arrived beneath a sky the color of steel. Snow continued to blanket the grounds of castle, erasing the tracks had left behind only hours earlier. Duke Alaric had not slept. He remained in his study through the night, staring into a dying fire while convincing himself he felt relief. Instead, an unsettling emptiness followed him wherever he looked. Her favorite chair stood beside the window. A book she had been reading rested on a side table. A forgotten ribbon lay near the fireplace. The castle still carried traces of her presence, yet she was gone. As dawn light filtered through the frosted glass, Alaric noticed an envelope resting on his desk. His name was written on the front in elegant handwriting. For several moments, he simply stared at it. Part of him feared opening it. Another part feared not opening it even more. Finally, he broke the seal. The first line struck him immediately. "By the time you read this, I will be gone." His throat tightened. He continued reading. "I wanted to leave with dignity because I loved you too much to beg for a place in your life." The words felt nothing like the accusations he expected. There was no bitterness. No anger. Only sadness. His eyes moved to the next paragraph. "I know about the test, Alaric." The letter nearly slipped from his hands. His heart stopped. He read the sentence again. Then again. She knew. The realization shattered every certainty he had built over the past weeks. Servants talk more than they realize. I learned enough to understand what was happening. I knew the financial ruin was not real. A cold sensation spread through his chest. All this time she had known, yet she had never confronted him, never humiliated him, never exposed the deception. Instead, she had quietly endured it. Alaric continued reading with growing dread. You wanted to know whether I loved your title, your wealth, or your position. I wish you had simply asked me. His grip tightened around the paper. Each sentence felt sharper than the one before. I sold my jewelry because I believed supporting you mattered more than keeping treasures. Not because I feared poverty, but because I thought marriage meant carrying burdens together. Memories flooded his mind. The sapphire bracelet, the necklace from her grandmother, the family heirlooms. He had watched every sacrifice and still chosen suspicion. The shame was unbearable. Then he reached the passage that destroyed him completely. The saddest part is not that you doubted me, it is that you never trusted the love I gave you every day. Alaric closed his eyes. The room suddenly felt suffocating. For years he had convinced himself that caution protected people from pain. Now he understood something far worse. His fear had become the source of pain. The letter continued. The conversation you overheard with was not about leaving you. I said I could not continue watching you suffer alone. I barely recognized the man I loved because he kept pushing me away. Alaric's breathing became uneven. He remembered walking away before hearing the full conversation. He remembered assuming the worst. He remembered choosing judgment before understanding. Every mistake now stood before him with brutal clarity. I defended you when people criticized you. I waited for you when you worked late. I loved you on days when you were warm and on days when you were distant. I never stopped choosing you. A single tear landed on the page. Alaric stared at it in disbelief. He could not remember the last time he had cried. Yet now tears came freely. I hope one day you find peace with whatever wounds convinced you that love must be tested before it can be trusted. The words exposed him completely. Had understood him better than he understood himself. Even while suffering, she had seen the fear beneath his actions. The final lines blurred before his eyes. I will always cherish the beautiful moments we shared. They were real to me. I only wish they had been enough for you. Signed simply. Silence swallowed the study. Alaric lowered the letter slowly. For several seconds he could not move. Then the memories began. He saw laughing during their first winter together. He saw her sitting beside his bed when fever had nearly claimed him 2 years earlier. He remembered waking in the middle of the night to find her asleep in a chair because she refused to leave his side. He remembered every smile, every sacrifice, every act of devotion. He remembered how she looked at him. Not as a duke, not as a title, as a man, and he had thrown that away. A knock interrupted his thoughts. Lord entered cautiously. One glance at Alaric's face told him something terrible had happened. My lord. Alaric rose abruptly. Prepare my horse. Blinked. The storm is worsening. Prepare my horse. The command carried a desperation had never heard before. Within minutes, Alaric was racing through the snow-covered countryside. The wind clawed at his cloak. Ice stung his face. None of it mattered. He needed to find her. Every passing moment increased the possibility that he was too late. For the first time since childhood, genuine fear gripped him. Not fear of betrayal. Not fear of humiliation. Fear of losing someone irreplaceable. Meanwhile, struggled along a narrow road that wound through the mountains. The cold had become relentless. Her hands ached despite thick gloves. Snow gathered along the hem of her cloak. Exhaustion weighed heavily upon her. Yet she continued forward. Stopping felt impossible. Returning felt even worse. Each step carried her farther from the life she once imagined. She remembered her wedding day. The way Alaric had looked at her beneath the cathedral lights. The promise she believed they shared. The future she thought they would build. The memories hurt more than the cold. Still, she could not hate him. That realization frustrated her. After everything that happened, part of her heart still belonged to him. Back on the road, Alaric searched every village he encountered. He questioned innkeepers, stable workers, travelers, anyone who might have seen a young woman traveling alone. Hours passed. The storm intensified. His horse struggled through drifts that reached nearly to its knees. Yet Alaric refused to stop. At a small village near the foothills, an elderly shopkeeper finally offered a clue. "Young woman with dark hair," the man asked. Alaric stepped forward immediately. "Yes, I saw someone matching that description yesterday evening." Hope surged through him. "Where did she go?" The shopkeeper pointed toward the mountains. "Toward Saint's Chapel." Alaric's stomach dropped. The abandoned chapel sat high among dangerous cliffs. Reaching it during winter was difficult. Attempting it during a blizzard bordered on madness. Without hesitation, he turned his horse toward the mountain path. The journey became increasingly treacherous. Snow reduced visibility to almost nothing. Branches cracked beneath the weight of ice. The wind roared like an angry sea. Several times his horse nearly lost its footing. Still he pushed forward. The image of alone in the storm haunted him. As darkness approached, despair began creeping into his thoughts. What if he was too late? What if she had fallen somewhere along the mountain trail? What if his pride had already cost him everything? Then, through the curtain of snow, he saw it. A faint golden light. Small, distant, yet unmistakable. His heart pounded. High on the mountainside stood Saint's Chapel. One lonely lantern glowed behind its frost-covered window. Alaric urged his horse forward with renewed determination. The storm howled around him as he climbed the final stretch. Every instinct told him she was inside. Every beat of his heart prayed he was right. And when he finally reached the chapel door, he threw it open to a sight that turned his blood cold. Lay motionless beside the altar. And for one terrifying moment, Alaric could not tell whether she was breathing. For one horrifying moment, Duke Alaric forgot how to breathe. The lantern's weak glow illuminated the small chapel, casting trembling shadows across the stone floor. Snow rattled against the stained glass windows while icy wind slipped through cracks in the ancient walls. None of it mattered. His entire world had narrowed to the woman lying motionless beside the altar. The sound emerged as little more than a whisper. He crossed the distance between them in seconds and dropped to his knees. Her skin was pale from the cold. Strands of dark hair rested against her cheeks. Terror surged through him as he reached for her hand. It was freezing. His heart nearly stopped. Then he felt it. A faint pulse. Weak, but present. Relief struck so suddenly that his eyes burned. Thank God. Alaric carefully lifted her into his arms and carried her toward the chapel's small fireplace. The remaining wood nearby was damp, but after several desperate attempts, he managed to coax a flame to life. Hours passed. The storm continued raging outside. Inside, Alaric remained beside her. He wrapped blankets around her trembling body. He warmed her hands between his own. He watched every rise and fall of her chest as though each breath were a precious miracle. Throughout the long night, sleep never came. His mind refused to rest. Every mistake replayed endlessly. Every cruel word. Every opportunity he had wasted. Every moment he had chosen suspicion instead of trust. He remembered the day they met. Had been standing in a garden surrounded by roses, laughing at something Lady had said. The sound had drawn his attention immediately. He had spent years surrounded by people who calculated every word they spoke. Was different. She was genuine. Warm. Honest. She had never hidden who she was. The tragedy was that he had hidden himself. Even after marriage, he had protected his fears instead of sharing them. Now those fears had nearly cost him the person he loved most. Shortly before dawn stirred. The movement was slight. Yet Alaric noticed instantly. His body tensed. Slowly her eyes opened. Confusion clouded them at first. Then recognition appeared. Alaric. Her voice was weak. The simple sound of his name nearly broke him. Without hesitation, he dropped to his knees beside her. The proud duke who commanded armies and estates no longer existed. Only a frightened man remained. You're awake. Blinked slowly. What are you doing here? The question pierced his heart. Because the answer was painfully obvious. I should never have let you leave. Instead, he swallowed hard. I came to find you. A shadow crossed her expression. For a moment neither spoke. The silence carried everything that had happened between them. Finally, Alaric lowered his gaze. I read your letter. Understanding flickered in her eyes. His chest tightened. Then he did something he had never done before. He allowed himself to be completely vulnerable. I'm sorry. The words emerged rough and broken. I am so sorry. Looked at him quietly. No anger appeared on her face. That somehow made everything worse. Alaric continued. I was afraid. The confession surprised even him. For years he had hidden behind pride. Now the truth poured out uncontrollably. I heard people saying you married me for my title, for my wealth, for my position. His voice trembled. I knew they were wrong, yet part of me believed them anyway. Listened silently. I should have trusted you. Yes, she said softly. The simple agreement hurt because it was true. Alaric nodded. I created that ridiculous test because I wanted certainty. His laugh held no humor. But certainty doesn't exist, does it? No, I thought I was protecting myself. His eyes filled with regret. Instead, I became the person who hurt you. The chapel grew quiet once more. Snow drifted past the windows. The storm that had seemed unstoppable now sounded distant. Looked toward the fire. For several moments she appeared lost in thought. When she finally spoke, her voice carried deep sadness. Do you know what hurt most? Alaric shook his head. It wasn't the test. Her words surprised him. It wasn't even the accusations. She turned toward him. It was realizing that after everything we shared, you still believed I needed to prove my love. The truth struck with devastating force. Continued. I stood beside you through every difficult moment. Tears shimmered in her eyes. I chose you every single day. A tear slipped down her cheek. And somehow that wasn't enough. Alaric felt his heart crack beneath the weight of her pain. He reached for her hand carefully. This time she allowed it. I know. His voice broke. And I will regret that for the rest of my life. Stared at their joined hands. For a long moment neither moved. Then Alaric spoke again. If you never forgive me, I will understand. The admission cost him everything. But I need you to know the truth. She looked at him. I love you. No hesitation remained. No pride. No fear. Only honesty. I loved you when we married. His grip tightened slightly. I loved you when I pushed you away. A tear escaped. And I loved you every second after you left. Emotion flickered across face. Alaric continued before courage abandoned him. When I watched you disappear into that storm, I felt something break. His eyes never left hers. Reading your letter showed me what that was. What? My illusion that I could live without you. The confession settled between them. Raw, unfiltered. Drew, for the first time since entering the chapel, smiled faintly. It was small, fragile, yet it filled him with hope. I still love you too. The words nearly stole his breath. But love isn't enough by itself. Alaric nodded immediately. I know. Trust matters. Yes, honesty matters. More than anything. She studied him carefully. Perhaps searching for signs of the man who had doubted her. Perhaps searching for reasons to believe. At last she exhaled slowly. You were wrong, Alaric. I know. You hurt me. I know. And if we move forward, things must change. His answer came without hesitation. They will. For the first time in months, genuine peace settled over them. Not because every wound had healed, but because truth finally occupied the space where misunderstanding once lived. As daylight spread across the mountains, the storm ended. Hours later, they stepped outside together. Fresh snow covered the landscape in dazzling white. The world appeared untouched. Almost new. Alaric led a short distance from the chapel. Then he stopped. Confusion crossed her face. Before she could speak, he reached into his coat. A small velvet box emerged. Size widened. Alaric opened it. Inside rested a ring. Simple, elegant, beautiful, not meant to impress a duchess. Meant to honor a woman, he lowered himself onto one knee. Snowflakes drifted around them. The sight would have shocked every noble in the kingdom. The mighty Duke of kneeling in the snow. Yet he had never been more certain of anything. 3 years ago I asked you to marry a duke. Emotion thickened his voice. Today I'm asking something different. Tears filled eyes. Alaric looked up at her. Will you marry me again? The wind carried the question into the silent mountains. This time not because of titles. His gaze never wavered. Not because of duty. Another tear escaped. But because I'm a man hopelessly in love with you. Covered her mouth. For several seconds she could not speak. Then she laughed through her tears. The beautiful sound echoed across the snow-covered valley. Yes. Relief overwhelmed him. Yes. She nodded. Yes, Alaric. He slipped the ring onto her finger. The moment it settled into place, she pulled him to his feet and wrapped her arms around him. Alaric held her tightly. Neither wanted to let go. Weeks later, Castle hosted a celebration unlike any in its history. Family, friends, servants, and villagers gathered beneath crystal chandeliers and winter decorations. It was not merely a wedding. It was a beginning. When Alaric and exchanged vows once more, they promised something deeper than love. They promised trust. They promised honesty. They promised never to let fear speak louder than truth. That evening they shared their first dance beneath open skies, while gentle snowflakes drifted from above. The same winter that had nearly separated them forever now witnessed their reunion. As music filled the air, Alaric drew closer. She rested her head against his chest. Neither spoke. Words were unnecessary. They had learned the lesson that changed their lives. Love cannot survive endless tests. Loyalty cannot flourish beneath suspicion. The strongest hearts are not those that demand proof. They are the ones brave enough to trust. And beneath the falling snow, surrounded by light and laughter, Alaric and finally understood a truth that would guide them for the rest of their lives. They had almost lost each other because of misunderstanding. They would keep each other because of trust.